What's up guys, and welcome back to my Pokemon Sun and Moon coverage video. And today it's not really a theory as such, but it's more of a discussion. I'm going to be talking about how Norse mythology might be inspiring some of the mainly legendaries in Pokemon Sun and Moon. So as some of you may know if you watched some of my videos leading up to X and Y's release, the legendaries from X and Y, Xerneas, Yveltal and Zygarde, are based off of creatures from Norse mythology. Basically, Norse mythology can be described as there is basically a tree called Yggdrasil, which is one of the main areas. It contains different sections. You have Asgard towards the top of the tree, Midgard in the middle, and then lower down, I can't remember the name for it, but it's the lower section. And obviously you've got all these, as you can see on the picture, all these other realms coming off of it. But as you can see, there is also a snake on the image. This snake is Jormungandr, something along those lines. I can't remember the full name of it. It's a bit tricky, hard name to say. But this is the inspiration for Zygarde there. In the middle of the tree, you can see there is a deer peeking its head around the edge of the tree, and this is assumed to be, the inspiration for Xerneas. And then towards the top of the tree, you can see right at the top we have this eagle here. Doesn't have a name, but the eagle, as you can tell, is a basis for Yveltal. So that's where we assume the good majority of the inspiration for those three comes from. So it makes sense if they were to carry on using Norse mythology almost, because the next games are Sun and Moon. So surely if Norse mythology has some Sun and Moon inspiration, they could use some of that. Also, I think majority of, don't hold me to this, but I think the majority of the inspiration for the main sort of story sections, legendaries for the first 5 or so generations came from sort of like, either just generic stuff or from Japanese cultures. Whereas, as we saw for Generation 6, this is Norse mythology, so it's not really Japanese but we might be moving off into this. And as I said, it makes sense if they were to carry on at least for another generation or two. So I did a little digging around and thought, right, okay, so we have Sun and Moon. Maybe there are some deities or some concepts from Norse mythology that we might be able to use for Sun and Moon, particularly for the two main legendaries. Well, there are two humans, they actually are, for the Sun and Moon. There is Sol and there is Mani. Basically, Sol and Mani are the daughter and son of a man named Mundilfari, and he was a human living in Midgard in the middle of the tree. And basically he had these two children, and he named them after the sun and the moon, obviously Sol and Mani. However, the gods were actually outraged that Mundilfari named his two children after such, amazing things as the sun and the moon. So, as a punishment, the gods took these children and threw them into the sky, where they were banished to each drive a chariot pulled by horses. And basically how this story goes is that they're both riding on chariots, they're humans, they both ride on chariots that are pulled by horses in the sky, and Sol's chariot pulls the sun, and Mani's chariot pulls the moon, as you would expect. So they are cursed, they are, banished to ride through the sky on their chariots, carrying the sun and the moon until Ragnarok appears, and we'll talk a bit more about Ragnarok in a minute. But that's sort of the general idea behind it. Obviously it's a bit weird because it's mythology, so it's not, I guess, believable. I don't know if there's whatever. But some other details about Sol as well is she ended up marrying she's the wife of Glenr. Glenr it's not really explained who Glenr is, but basically his name in Old Norse it means the opening in the clouds. So it basically it's just possibly just the name is given to him because sun opening in the clouds, the sun can shine down. It's not really given any sort of definition of who he is. However, Glenr is also an alternate name for Glea, so it could be related to that. Glea is one of the horses listed among those, but ridden by the gods. But it's unlikely that Glenr is a horse because human horse, bit weird. But that is about Sol. Mani, another thing to point out about Mani is that Mani has actually two children. It's not mentioned who Mani's wife is, but Mani has two children who are Hjörki and Bil. Hjörki meaning the one returning to health, and Bil meaning instant. They're the brother and sister, and they basically follow Mani across the heavens, across the sky. It's not, obviously, they sort of take over for him, I guess, after Ragnarok. As I said, we'll discuss a bit more in a minute. It's also worth mentioning Sol actually has a daughter herself. There is no name mentioned for Sol's daughter because, again, it's related to Ragnarok, and we'll move on to that and talk about it a bit now. So for you guys that don't know what Ragnarok is, you haven't heard of Ragnarok before, it might be mentioned in, in current popular cultures, but you might not know what Ragnarok is in terms of Norse mythology. Basically, Ragnarok is a series of events that are due to happen in the future, and they're sort of foretold, and it includes a great battle between the gods, or between, not necessarily packs of gods, but gods against, those that want to do evil to the world. And it's also accompanied by natural disasters, and also the world is then submerged in water. However, after this all happens, the world resurfaces up, and you get a new world, coming, so it's renewal almost, and obviously the surviving gods then take over. And there's only 2 human survivors after that happens, so it's sort of like a cleansing of the world almost, and then you just get the 2 human survivors pop up. So, what happens in Ragnarok? Well, the main sort of antagonists of Ragnarok are I think he's a god. He's a god called Loki, who I'm sure you might have heard of if you've watched Marvel, for example. Loki is a character in I think the first Marvel. I don't know which, in Thor. I think the first Thor film, he is the antagonist there. But obviously it's a slightly different concept. But Loki, I'm pretty sure, is a god. And if I could find his page, that would help. Yes. Loki is, yes, a god, and one of the main gods, I guess, of Norse mythology. He's also the father of Hel, Fenrir, and Jormungandr. Hel being, let me just check here. Hel is a being, and he presides over Hel, basically. So it's he's another god that is almost like Satan. Okay, so Loki is the father of Satan, so he's obviously not a good guy to start off with. Fenrir is a wolf, and this will come up in a bit more detail in a minute, but obviously it's a wolf, monstrous wolf actually, and we'll find out some more about him in a minute. And then obviously, as I mentioned, the world serpent Jormungandr, who is the basically the character that Zygarde is based off of. So these 4 are almost the main antagonists, I guess, of Ragnarok. Well, the other gods don't exactly like this, but basically what happens is, at one point before Ragnarok, Loki was sort of cast and chained up almost, as well as the same happened for Fenrir as well. Fenrir was chained up and bound, I guess is the word it used to describe itself. Loki's also bound on top of 3 stones, and it's basically, he sits there. However, when Ragnarok begins, it comes in with loads of natural disasters, as I mentioned. So you have earthquakes and such like that. So Loki breaks free, as does Fenrir, and they sort of go on a rampage. So in the end, you get gods like Odin dying as well. So it's a pretty disastrous battle. But in terms of what we care about here, what actually happens is thing with Norse mythology is it's a bit contradictory at times, and there are two counts almost of what could happen here. Basically, when talking about Sol and Mani, there is also another pair of creatures related to them, and these are 2 wolves called Skoll and Hati. Their names meaning mockery and hate, and they are basically just wolves that chase them through the sky, but never catch up to them, at least not until Ragnarok. So basically, there are wolves that are chasing after them, and then Ragnarok comes, they manage to overtake them and kill them. Hence why Sol and Mani manage to have children, so after Ragnarok ends, the sun and the moon can be carried once again. But this is one account. The other account is that Fenrir actually is the one that devours the sun and the moon, or devours Sol and Mani. It's not exactly clear who actually kills them in the end, but Sol and Mani do die during Ragnarok. And as mentioned, the children take over in the end, or at least Sol's daughter does for her. Mani is not necessarily mentioned which one takes over the bearing of the moon, I guess, because obviously he has 2 children, but we can assume they maybe share the responsibility almost. But obviously everyone else dies, just a few gods survive Ragnarok. So how could this impact on Sun and Moon? Well, as you might expect, we could say, right, Sol and Mani might be inspirations for the 2 main legendaries. However, they're humans, so we can't really go straight from, okay, for example, with Jormungandr, we could say he's a snake. Oh yeah, snake is going to be a Z-like legendary based on a snake, as we said. However, we can look at something else. We know they are driving chariots that are pulled by horses. So my thinking is maybe the two legendaries, or Sun and Moon, will have some basis from horses, or at least something similar along those lines. Maybe be like similar legendaries to each other, have four, be having four long legs, a body, maybe some horse-like head, and then it depends obviously from there. So I feel like having horses as the basis for Sun and Moon legendaries would be pretty good. We haven't seen too many horse bases. We've obviously seen Ponyta and Rapidash Generation 1. There's obviously Deerling and Swordsbuck from Generation 5. But I can't think of too many others, apart from maybe like Stantler, but it's not really a horse, but it's a horse-like creature. But there's been no legendaries based off of horses, and having this Sun and Moon being horses being like chased around would make a lot of sense as horses, because the sun isn't exactly, it's a very evasive concept, I guess, if you guys understand what I mean there. So that's a possibility there. My other thinking while I was researching this, when I found out that Marnie had two children, Huki and Bill, a brother and a sister. So they are children of the moon god, I guess. What other main sort of concepts from Pokemon, two things relate to the moon, do we know about? Well, my thoughts were, we have Cresselia and Darkrai. Cresselia is a female, as we know. Darkrai is, I don't think it's 100% male, but it's genderless, basically. As we know that Cresselia is listed as the lunar Pokemon, Darkrai is listed as the pitch black Pokemon, but it does reside, on New Moon Island, which would make a lot of sense, and of course it's a member of the Lunar Duo along with Cresselia as listed. It's a fan-made term, but they can be seen as, they work together, because obviously Cresselia and Darkrai, Darkrai has a lot of, Darkrai creates nightmares, whereas Cresselia calms them, in Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, when you have to go and get the Lunar Wing from Cresselia to give to the child, basically. And obviously we've seen them in battles as well. I think not necessarily a movie, but an anime episode or a movie, they appear against each other, as well as in Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time, Darkness and Sky, they are enemies. So they're parallels to each other. They may be enemies, yes, but obviously brother sister doesn't necessarily mean you have to be friends. But they are both related to the moon in some way. They are a duo, basically. So my thoughts were, okay, maybe Huki is Darkrai, or whichever way around. I don't know which one's a girl, which one's a boy. Weird names. But basically, maybe these two. I'm not saying they're going to be related to the Moon Legendary in any conceivable way, but I was thinking it might be a nice sort of tie-in there. Okay, we've got brother and sister, Darkrai, Cresselia. That makes a lot of sense. Obviously, let me know your thoughts about that down below, because I think it would be cool if they tied it in some way, because they obviously are both related to the moon as well. So if there was some sort of acknowledgement maybe, but I thought I'd just point that out there, because it might be a little addition. But I was also thinking about Mundalfari, as you remember, is the father of Sol and Marnie. I was thinking maybe he, not necessarily he, but a Pokemon using his sort of concept may well also become a legendary and maybe be the last of the trio, basically. So you have Sol, Marnie being the Sun and Moon legendaries, and then Mundalfari being some other type of legendary, one maybe having dominion over the Sun and the Moon, maybe. His name in Norse means the one moving according to particular times. So it's a bit of a weird concept there. It's more of a it's not a solid concept. It's more of an abstract concept where it's up for debate, up for sort of interpretation. But I feel like that might not necessarily use his name or any concept. Because he's a human in Norse mythology, but I think he might possibly turn out to be, have some inspiration for the third member of the trio, because obviously it would be a bit weird to have just Sun and Moon. You want to have something to have dominion over them, because obviously if you had the sun shining all the time, that wouldn't be good. Just the same if you had had Groudon out all the time, creating land everywhere, it's not going to have a good balance. So Sun and Moon need a good balance, because the Moon controls the seas, and the Sun obviously keeps the world alive. So they might have a possible tie in there for the last member of the trio. I don't know. The other thing I wanted to talk about was Skull and Hearty, or Fenrir, because I feel like maybe they could have a second trio. Obviously you have, I'm trying to think about, in Generation 4 you have Dialga, Palkia, Giratina, and then you have the Lake Trio. They are related, as we saw in the anime, as well as actually in the games too. The Lake Trio can be used to make a red chain for summoning Dialga, Palkia, etc. So there's nothing saying we couldn't have two trios that could be related in some way. We could have Solmani and obviously a final member of that trio there, and we could also have a trio of wolf-based Pokemon, Skull, Hearty, and Fenrir. Fenrir being sort of the trio leader. And they could be sort of, the antagonists against this main legendary trio, and possibly the evil team could end up using these wolves to either, because obviously if we think about what their goals might be for the games, okay, maybe in Pokemon Sun the evil team wants to get rid of the moon, so it's just the sun all the time, and vice versa for moon. So maybe they have to use the wolf, the respective wolf. I hear about the sort of the myths and such, saying that the wolf can, take out the sun, or basically something along those lines. So they go and find this mythical wolf and try and take control of it to get rid of the sun or moon, respectively. So it's possible they could have a secondary trio of wolves here as well. That would be a possibility, I guess. It'd be nice to see a trio of wolves. In terms of what types they'd be, I don't really know. I'm guessing they'd all be dark types because they are wolves. They are nasty, I guess. But they could also have secondary types, because obviously if one's going to combat the sun, one's going to combat the moon, you might say that suddenly, if we assume the sun and moon legendaries are going to be like fire and fairy type, because obviously fairy's got moonblast and such. So if we assume one's going to be like dark water and the other one's maybe dark poison, something along those lines, just to combat the other two, the sun and moon respectively, and then maybe Fenrir is just sort of a simple on its own. I don't know, having a mastery of them all. I don't know. There are possibilities, guys. I'm just throwing ideas out here. But what I want to know is, what do you think of all this Norse mythology such? Do you think that the Pokemon creators are going to carry on using some Norse sort of inspiration for their legendary stories? Are we going to see Sol and Mani, or the Sun and Moon legendaries having horse basis? And then having possibly this secondary trio of wolves, because obviously horses and wolves, wolves chase down horses. Horses are very aggressive, so it makes a lot of sense for wolves to chase after horses. So maybe just let me know what you think down below, guys. Do you think the main legendary is going to be based on horses, and do you think there's going to be like wolves chasing them, sort of thing, and having a secondary trio of antagonists almost for legendaries? Let me know what you think about all this down below in the comment section, guys. I'm really interested to see what you think, because I think Norse mythology could carry on being used, but obviously it's a bit of a long stretch. We haven't got too much, we haven't got any data backing it up. But, obviously X and Y used it, so maybe Sun and Moon will carry on using it too. Let me know what you think about those down below in the comment section, guys, but this is going to be it for me for today. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, but for now, I'm seeing you next time. Goodbye, my friends.